Welcome, it is SVPod. Really bad day to not have the big man. He's traveling. Thanks to my dear friends in the text thread that described the pod as rudderless without him. I disagree. I'm quite capable of talking. It would just be fun to bounce some stuff off the big man. It's just me. If that's disappointing to you, I get it. Disappointing to me as well. But let's talk some ball, shall we? Quite a day, an amazing day, a lot of stuff, changes. I'm going to start with the thing I have seen most recently because it's fresh in my mind. It's not the lead of the day, but I have to talk about it immediately. The rules of college football overtime are horrendous. You're furious right now. And you're yelling, NFL overtime's worse. It's not the point. It's not the point. You've heard this argument from me before through the years. Football is a timed game played on a 100-yard field. And then we get to overtime, and it isn't. There is no clock. We start at the 25. That's dumb. I have a fix. I'll get to it. Then you play overtime. If we're tied, we play a second overtime. And then, as I said on Twitter, the single dumbest rule in sports applies. How should we settle this? I don't know. Should we do rock, paper, scissors? No. Something dumber and more arbitrary. 2-point conversions. You got it. A&M falls on the loveliest village in the plains. An insane game. It's 21-0 Auburn. Had them in winners. It is just, as soon as you see the line, you go, how much are you comfortable winning? That's all you have to ask yourself. But in the end, it's pretty heartbreaking for A&M to lose a game like that because they drop a 2-point conversion in the third overtime. Doesn't make any sense at all. What are we doing? Here's the fix. It's simple. It's simple. College overtime's more fun, for sure. I like the premise of you get the ball, we get the ball, let's go. But here's what you do. Wait for it. You start at the 50. Why? Well, as I've said for years, if you've heard this argument, you know it. There's a reason why they started the red zone channel, because if you get to the red zone, you've done something worthwhile. You're in an area where you can score. In college overtime, you start there. You've done nothing. You've earned nothing. You just walk out there and you're at the 25. You could throw 3 incompletions. Hell, you could get sacked and lose 10 yards and still score. You shouldn't be able to score if you don't do anything. Start at the 50. Then you have to at least, college kickers, I've seen a bunch of guys this year make high 50s. I think we've seen kicking evolve to the point where the range, just like the NBA and college basketball, dudes can shoot it to 30 feet comfortably. Guys can make it to 60 yards comfortably. From the 50, you're not kicking a 67-yarder. You should have to do something to be in scoring range. Start at the 50. I promise you're not going to need 3 overtimes. But just keep the same rules until someone wins. It can't be this ridiculous bullshit where it's 2-point conversions. A team might have just got knocked out of the playoff as a result of that. A team that fought back from down 21-0. But they lose on a perfect play design, and you get a drop. Heart breaks for it. A&M. They still got Texas coming in. You guys have been waiting forever for that game. Does it mean as much for you? Well, if you win, you could still make it to Atlanta, where Georgia, who was just sitting there minding their own business. Actually, they weren't. They played UMass and were behind. I have some thoughts on that in a minute. But now they're in Atlanta again. But 3 losses, A&M. If you beat Texas and you beat Georgia, well, then you're in because you just won the SEC. But that's the fix for college overtime. You can't get to a third overtime and just have nonsense. What are we going to do? Charades. Categories. Is that still a thing? Anyway. Incredible game. Upsets. Story of the day this. Remember the story I told you the other day about Van Pelt map class, geography, maps, pass, fail. Didn't attend a lot of classes. Last exam, I was at the back end of a flying pica wedge. A couple of people in the middle had taken some hallucinogenics. I'm like, I'm cheating off a guy who's cheating off a guy, and they're all probably still flying on mushrooms. This doesn't seem like a real good chance for your boy to get the pass. Today's pass-fail day. Here's the teams that passed. Ohio State with flying colors. Texas, another, okay. Penn State, by that much. Notre Dame, wow. Miami, close-ish for a while. I think that was a bad beat in the end. They win by 28. Boise, yuck. SMU, ponies to the ACC championship game. Back into the Big 12, abject mayhem. Arizona State, you get a passing grade. Iowa State, I don't know how, against the zombie quarterbacks of Utah. I think in the end it was like fifth stringer. You get a passing grade. I'm not even addressing the SEC schools that played the Mass and UTEP and Wofford or whoever the hell, although God loves a terrier. Whoever they that's not the same. People that were in their own weight class, those are the passing grades. Here's who failed. The SEC. What a bad day for them. After this week of everybody going at each other about this, that, and the other, Bama. That's it. Done. Ole Miss, the same. A&M, I don't know. There's still a path. BYU, adios. Colorado, same. Army, we love you. God bless America. You got trucked. Those are the pass-fail grades. Let's discuss, shall we? Game of the day is Indiana, Ohio State. And it's interesting how people do this. They get and again, what I tell you the other day. Oh, actually, if you watched One Big Thing on SportsCenter, I said it's much like politics, and then I said actually it's exactly like politics. Because if you're red or blue, well, then you just say whatever the red or blue belief is, and nothing that the other side says could possibly have any merit. And if you're a Big Ten aficionado, well, the SEC's full of shit. And if you're an SEC fan, you say, well, our conference is just deeper. I will say this. You can roll your eyes, and I don't care because I've been to these places. Do we think that the games in Gainesville, Auburn, and Norman today, do we think those are the same as if you're playing in East Lansing or West Lafayette or College Park? I'll wear it. I don't think so. If you think otherwise, that's fine, because it's politics, and you can vote along party lines if that's how you feel. But this Indiana game, it's interesting to me. The people that were pot committed, well, they saw what they needed to see. Because Ohio State, Indiana kept them to not that many yards and this and that and the other thing. Like, all right, I guess. And if you're on the other side of the aisle and you're saying Indiana hasn't played anybody, well, they got beat by, 23 in the end? They had 150 yards. The first drive couldn't have been more impressive. They come out of the gate, bang. Signetti's boys are here to play. Could not have been more impressed. They get a goal line stand. They get another red zone turnover. They're battling. But they had 150 total yards. After that first touchdown drive, they didn't have another drive of consequence until it was 31-7. They ate up a ton of clock, and there was going to be a window dressing score where the final looked a whole lot better than the results. Rourke threw for 68 yards. 8 of 18, 68 yards. Largely, he was under duress. That Ohio State front just ate. 5 sacks, 8 tackles for losses. And This was Indiana's first opportunity truly in the ring in its weight class. And that's the result. Now, based on everything else that happens later in the day with people falling by the wayside, they're going to benefit and they're going to be in. But if you watch that game with Ohio State and you are going to try to sell me on they look the same as them, well, they don't. And they didn't. And that's not a crime. That's not a sin. But it was a weird game, I'll grant you, much like the Ohio State game completely turned last week in, not Evanston, in Chicago, because that game was in Wrigley. Much like that game changed on Northwestern's punter having it go through his hands, gets it blocked, they score, and the wheels fall off. Almost the same script. It starts raining, ball goes through Indiana's punter's hands. You gift them field position, Ohio State scores. Then Ohio State gets a punt return for a touchdown. So part of the reason why Ohio State's offensive numbers aren't a little bit better is because you get 14 points off of essentially no drives, right? You're gifted the ball in scoring position, and then you get a punt return for a touchdown. That was Downs, right? What an amazing punt return that was. And so when it's done, it's 30 straight wins for Ohio State over Indiana. And I appreciate all that Cignetti's done from the time he got there. He talked the talk. His guys have backed it up. And they went in there, and they were ready to fight. And if you want to know how much of Ohio State's attention you had, I thought it was interesting. They went to it was Henderson. Travion Henderson could have scored. He went down. And then Ohio State's like, the hell with that. We're scoring. I think Ryan Day wants to. He's salty. He's an FU kind of guy. They heard the chatter from Cignetti, I'm sure. And you know they heard it because you saw Will Howard go, hey, Sig, and then stomp out the cigarette. But you should be flattered, Indiana. I mean, you had their full attention. You're not in the same class historically, but you had their full attention today, and you battled. You fought them. But in the end, they're clearly demonstrably better. And outside of the first drive, which was really impressive, and the last drive, which I thought was sort of like Ohio State going, all right, whatever. You didn't do anything. But then everything else that happens the rest of the day, I don't think we're going to end up having to have a conversation about your relative merit because too many other teams fell away. You know who else passed today? I should have mentioned, I think, actually they get an A today probably, is Tennessee. Our guy Jack's smiling. Had nothing to do with UTEP. It had everything to do with the fact that all these other teams ahead of them. You know what a lot of life is? I'm going to tell you the truth. A lot of life, and I'm proof. A lot of life is just being there. You want to be honest about your boy at ESPN? Dan Patrick went and did his own thing. Rich Eisen went to the NFL Network. I was behind all these people. Back when it was sort of a more traditional, hope you get a slot on the anchor desk. That's the way people became guys or gals. People left. I wasn't great. Or was I? My mom thinks I'm great. That's all that matters. Show up. Get passing grades. If others step aside, step forward in line. Apologize to no one for that. Tennessee, no apologies. Or anybody that advances and benefits based on this week, apologize to nobody. For what? It's not my fault you guys got beat. We did too, but we were ahead of you, so maybe we don't fall behind you now. I'm going to try to stay conference by conference just because that's the only way I'm going to be able to make sense of this. Penn State gets the passing grade. I said Sky Yuma, too many points there. Minnesota's defense statistically really good. Penn State does not have great receivers. We know this. They can really run it, but Minnesota's defense is good. And they jumped out to a 10-0 lead. They played from ahead, but I give Penn State credit. You know, if we're going to talk about, like, it's hard to win on the road, I think it's hard to win on the road anywhere. All right? Look at Boise. I'll get to them. Actually, I won't. I'm going to do Boise right here. Boise, you guys messed around with Nevada. You were down 14-0 to San Jose State. You're down in the fourth quarter in Laradice to a 2-8 Wyoming team. Now, all that matters today, the only grade you can get is a P or an F. You get a P because you pass. But you've been messing around too much with people that everyone loves Genty. We'd love to see you in the playoff. I just have great fears that you might get toasted if this is where you guys are at right now. All right? You can't be messing around with Nevada, San Jose State, and Wyoming. What are we doing? But you won. Hard to win on the road. Boise and Laramie. Back to Penn State and Minneapolis. You're down double digits to a team that can play good defense. Keep chipping away. You get to the lead, had a big stand late, which kept the lead because you're up by 4. You hold Minnesota with a field goal, and then you go on this 12-play, 72-yard drive where you go for it on a fake punt. James Franklin said they'd had it called a number of times throughout the year. It was just a matter of getting the right look. That's ballsy, man. They run it. It works. Late, Aller, again, a little dump off, and they get the victory by 1 in the end. Scroll down for me here on that Penn State receiving. There we go. I just wanted to see. It was Tyler Warren's last catch. I didn't think he scored. 8 for $102. Number 44, Penn State's tight end. Absolute monster. And they get the win. And that's all that mattered today. Get a passing grade. Penn State's in the absolute perfect position. You get Maryland coming in next week. The Terps, the wheels are off. The Terps, whatever it was, unfortunately, it's a bummer, but we are where we are. You're going to be massive favorites to win that game. And then you get to just hang out. You're in the perfect spot. You don't have to play in a conference championship game. That's going to be Ohio State, assuming they beat Michigan. And Oregon, again, they'll run that back. And you can just hang out after that and go to the playoff. The perfect spot. Because you don't want to be in conference championship games. If you're Georgia, you don't want to be have to play Texas again. Why? Because if you lose, you're out. Like, you're in a playoff a round earlier than anyone else. You just don't want to be in these conference championship games. Unless you're somebody that needs it to get into the playoff. Like the Arizona State scenario. We'll get to the Big 12 in a minute. Like, Penn State, perfect. Perfect. All you got to do is beat Maryland and hang out. Good. We got a playoff game. Can't wait. Perfect situation. That's where you want to be. I also want to mention from the Big Ten the Illinois win, because that keeps Penn State's one-ranked win, and it was the most preposterous thing. I don't know if you're familiar with what happened. It was Rutgers actually played pretty well in the back half of the year. It's this back and forth game. Rutgers had a lead. Illinois signed up for 60. Bielema's guys battling until the very end. And then they're going to kick a field goal to try to win. And keep chopping wood. Schiano calls timeout. The kicker kicked it anyway. It's short. And my guy Brett Bielema, realizes our kicker can't make this. So they decide to go for it. And what happens is Luke Altmaier hits Bryant. Pat Bryant had 7 for 197, and they score a touchdown in the waning moments of that game. Worth mentioning just because it's a ranked win for Penn State. It's a win for Illinois, which was one of the more bananas. It's also a bad beat because that number was in the mix there, and if you're on Rutgers, you're going to get there. Then you don't. I don't know of a conference that had a more chaotic day than the Big 12. Salute the KU wagon. I said on Winners a few weeks back, I guess it was 3 weeks back, that they're the best 2-6 team in America, which is like saying you're the bald guy with the best haircut, obviously, but bump. Who wants to be the best 2-6 team? If you look at their schedule, no one lost more ridiculous one-score games than Kansas did. They were way better than their record. They went out and beat Iowa State, rolled them. They went to Provo, they beat BYU, and now they roll Colorado. Colorado could do nothing to slow them down. KU is a team no one wants to play. I am openly rooting for them against Baylor, nothing against Sick 'em Bears. I just want Kansas to go to a bowl game because I want them to continue this run. Like in the history of no one has ever had their record, then beat 3 ranked teams in a row. The star of this day was Devin Neal. He had 287 scrimmage yards. Now, Hunter for Colorado, 8 for 125, 2 touchdowns. First half, Colorado was hanging in there, trading punches. But their defense could do nothing against this Colorado offense. Like I said, they're a wagon right now. 520 for them. Their 3rd-ranked win in a row. So Kansas takes Colorado's hopes and says, sorry, that's the end of you. Arizona State, shout to Kenny D, Forks again. They beat BYU. BYU, you were unbeaten this time a week ago. Your hopes are now toast. Arizona State has the inside track on playing for the Big 12 championship game where they would face Iowa State, who won a ridiculous back-and-forth slugfest with Utah. And I stand by what we said about Utah earlier this year about how it's like they're just going to hit your big toe with a hammer for 3 hours. They've had an incredibly rough go with injuries. Their record is not good. Whittingham's teams don't have records like this typically, but they fought their butts off. Could have beat BYU, could have beat Iowa State. They beat neither. Or do you say neither? Are you a neither or neither? I'm a neither. I don't know why I say neither. Did I say neither? Neither. And so BYU loses this game to Arizona State. And so Arizona State, who preseason over-under in Vegas was 4.5 wins, they now have 9, and they could go to the Big 12 Conference Championship game. I say could because everything's in play. There's a 4-way tie at the top. Arizona State plays Arizona. That's for the dirty old boot. I think it's for Old Dirty Bastards boot. It's for the ODB boot. Look it up. And if they win that, they're in, which is amazing. We need to discuss the end of the game. What was that? What were you doing? The end of Arizona State BYU was damn near the dumbest thing that's ever happened. It's 28-23. BYU's driving. Arizona State gets a pick. And then Arizona State starts doing the clock math and whatever. They're inside like the 5-yard line. You got my guy, Cam Skattebo. How many did he go for today? Skattebo had 147 and 3 touchdowns. If you haven't seen this young man play, you must watch him. It's like a rhinoceros running. You can't tackle him. They're inside. They could score again. Now, I get it. Maybe don't score. I'm always the guy that says if you could take knees, because if they can't get the ball back, there's no way they can win. But if you go up by 12, they can't win. Arizona State starts going backwards like 20 yards at a time. 20 yards at a time. And they end up back at it midfield, and they try to do that like roll right, throw it out of bounds. The clock will be exhausted, and the game ends. Only BYU brings pressure, so Arizona State's got to chuck it early, which they do. And when Levitt throws it early, they review. They storm the field, Sparky all over the place. They put a second back on the clock, which means Retzlaff gets a chance to throw a Hail Mary, which actually got caught, but it was at the 2. If BYU would have beat you, this is hyperbole and it's prisoner of the moment. I'm just saying it would have been the dumbest thing that's ever happened in the history of the world. Dumber even than college football overtime rules. You could have just scored a touchdown and put it to bed, but you go backwards, throw it out of bounds, field gets stormed. It took like 15 minutes to get people off the field. If BYU would have won, it's a good thing it didn't happen. Because if it did, it's catastrophic and people can't get past it ever. But they didn't. So Arizona State, they get ready to play for ODB's boot against Arizona. Who, by the way, Arizona, I don't know what happened to you this year. You've been a disaster. Just a catastrophe. Tucson Slim, better days. Where shall I go next on my card? I'm going to save the SEC because there's a lot. ACC, let's do that just so I can address SMU. Ponies, that's an impressive win for this reason. Noon, Charlottesville, East Coast. You guys are probably looking around going, what in the hell are we doing here? How did we get here? Well, you know what? You're here and you go to the ACC championship game if you win. Just don't let them hang around. And you didn't. It's 17-0 at the half. It's 20-0 after three quarters. And they talk about game control. It's a game you controlled from the jump. Numbers wise, what sort of stands out? I guess Jennings threw for 3 1/4. But really, the main thing was just this: win the game, go to the ACC championship game, put yourself in position to be in position. You're there. Now you got a game to win. It appears it's going to be against Miami. Miami and Wake, kind of a weird. Miami's played a lot of these games. Their defense isn't awesome. I can't wait to see this SMU offense against that Miami defense, because the Miami defense is not its strength, as we know. And that Pony offense is capable of hanging big numbers. But it won't be Miami if Miami goes to Syracuse and stumbles. That can happen. That can happen. So that's a play-in game, if you will, for Miami. They'll be favored, but not by a ton, I don't believe. Syracuse and winners guaranteed. General principle. Funny thing happened on the way to the Citadel game for Clemson. With all these losses now, Clemson, could they be in play? Could they be in play with a South Carolina win? They beat South Carolina. South Carolina's been playing well. South Carolina's a ranked win. People forget about that Louisville loss. Clemson could be in Penn State mode. Don't have to go to the ACC championship game. Just hang out and get a bid. Possibility of that. They played the Citadel today. Now, before I get to the SEC, see, they play the Citadel today. And everyone gets pissed at the SEC because Georgia plays UMass. South Carolina played Wofford. Bama last week played Mercer. You get to November and they play these games, and it makes people furious because other leagues are playing conference games. Now, the SEC plays one fewer. That is true. But if these Wofford, UMass, UTEP, Tennessee played UTEP, if those games are happening in September, when Ohio State's playing the MAC and the ACC's playing whatever they're playing, and the other Big Ten teams are playing directional from wherever, again, it's mostly MAC-type schools, then no one cares. But you do it in November, and people act like it's an affront to society. Well, Georgia next week plays Georgia Tech. South Carolina next week plays Clemson. There's a reason why Clemson's playing the Citadel today, because they play South Carolina next week. Florida will play Florida State in its last game, which traditionally is a big game, but obviously this year is not. So I guess what I'm saying is that a number of these SEC schools are in rivalry games and in Power 4 out-of-state, in-state, out-of-conference rivalry games next week. So it doesn't trouble me the way it troubles you, but it just gives you guys a chance to bitch about the SEC, which you love to do, because we all know it's our agenda to do so. Well, listen, it was a tough day for that league because Bama was a playoff team. Now they're not. And guess what? That Vandy loss, I can not explain it away. I think I understand what happens. Vanderbilt's better. The loss against Tennessee, Tennessee's a potential playoff team. It's not a terrible. You have to play more of those games than you do in the Big Ten. That's just a fact, because there's more of them. But you go to take on an Oklahoma team that has been objectively poor and has underachieved. Are you likely to get their best shot in their final home game in what has been a down, disappointing year? You are, but you got to be better than that. And OU held Jalen Milroe to 7 rushing yards. Brent Venables and that OU defense deserves all the credit in the world. You put on that LSU tape, and the sin of LSU was allowing Milroe to beat him with his legs. You've got to do what OU did and say to Jalen Milroe, you want to beat us 4? You're going to have to chuck it. He got picked 3 times. One of them was a pick 6. I will address what appeared to be a horrific call against Alabama. It looked like there was a touchdown pass. If I could peruse, I'm perusing here the receiving numbers. What did Ryan Williams ended up with 2 for 37, which is amazing. It was a deep ball for a touchdown, that incredible freshman campaign. I should have had 3 catches for would have been over 60 or 70 yards and a touchdown. It was a horrendous call against Bama. Same crew that had a rough night in Austin between Texas and Georgia. But that touchdown would have been worth, I'm doing the math here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, would have been worth 6. Would have made it 24-10. Bama fans, every right to be pissed about that. Bad call. You weren't winning this football game. You weren't. Wasn't your night. OU's defense was the best unit on the field. And this is a disqualifying loss for Alabama. Almost certainly. Barring mayhem that I can't foresee next week, I think that's a wrap. I think. They've got some wins, we know that, but at some point 3 losses more than likely is disqualifying. I hesitate to use any definitives because it's college football, and so I don't know what else could happen. It would appear that's going to cost you. Ole Miss, same story. Hey, Florida fans, remember what your boy Scott told you back in the summer? Remember when Scott and Steve were talking to you? What'd we say? I'm not going to sing because I don't think we're allowed to do that, but we could do the whistle. A little patience, little GNR, late night. Just a little patience from from Florida fans. Billy Napier's defense plays its ass off. Langway is that guy. I don't know what Dart was doing. He had 2 interceptions. He tried to throw 8. Ole Miss had 1 chance. Dart throws a horrific interception. They get the ball back. He throws another. The Florida defense signed up for 60. They battle their butts off. They have, at the tail end of that horror stretch on their schedule, they get back-to-back home wins against LSU and Ole Miss, both of whom came in ranked in the playoff rankings. Ole Miss was in the top 12. They're now out. 3 losses for them. Got to be eliminating for them. My whole family, extended family, or not the family I married into, all Gators. And even now, they're still withholding. Well, I don't know about. And I got to choose my words carefully because I'm going to see folks at Thanksgiving. I don't need people pissed at me. But I'm like, what do you want? What do you want? Guys qualify to go bowling by beating LSU and Ole Miss on your home field. You guys can probably have a parade against FSU. Do whatever the hell you want, I would think. 7-5. What'd I tell you this year? Your record might not be great, but you can see improvement. Every now and then, give your boy a little credit because I think the Gators have proven me right. And Steve, I know what he said all year. Remember Steve's point. If it's not now for Ole Miss, when? And that's the thing about Penn State kind of went through this year when they played Ohio State. You're like, gee, what do we got to do, man? What do we have to do? The good news for Penn State, they appear to be a playoff team. The rough news for Ole Miss, doesn't look like it. And you're going to look back at that LSU loss and try to figure out how the heck that happened. Losing on your home field, a Kentucky team that's pretty limited on offense. Had to win today, and they didn't. And now they got the Egg Bowl. Mississippi State's a mess, so you can get to 9-3, but it figures to be a good bowl, but not what you hope for it to be if you're Ole Miss. I mentioned Kentucky, who beat Ole Miss. They go to Austin. It's another grinded-out game for Texas. I mean, in the end, Quinn's clean. He went through the senior day ceremonies. I think we all understand he's headed to the NFL. Their defense made a bunch of plays. Kentucky got close, got into the red zone. They got stopped. They actually had a defensive touchdown. In the end, I don't know. It's sort of the script for Texas this year. But you know what? That's a game against an overmatched opponent that get a passing grade, go down to College Station and buckle up, because they've been waiting down there forever for that game, and now it's coming. And so you know what you're walking into. Sark's been on me a bunch, not a bunch. Sark was on with me this year. He talked about culture, talked about building culture. This is a game to demonstrate it. Not this one, the next one. Because you're facing a wounded, pissed off bunch of Aggies that don't need a reason to get extra motivated for this ball game. And that'll be a fascinating one, especially off of what happened tonight down in Auburn. I don't know if I addressed the game as much, other than to say A&M down 21-0. That's a game where you could get absolutely boat raced. I went in to winners. I believe that was a GPG game. For those that aren't familiar, you don't watch. GPG's general principle game. Auburn is 4-6. They're getting 2.5 points from A&M. Figure it out. You're going to get the best of Jordan-Hare. That place was ready to go. Auburn, I thought, landed the knockout punch. Thorne had a couple beautiful passes. It's 21-0. A&M is toast. Only they weren't. They fight back. Marcel Reed had a couple of beautiful passes. Amari Daniels had 90 and a touchdown, and he's the guy that had the drop on the 2-point conversion. He was excellent for A&M. Ran with purpose and fury. Oh, I'm gutted for that young man. But that was such a classic spot where, if you're familiar with college football, got a text from our buddy Chris Felica, the Bear, earlier this week, and he and I both liked OU and Auburn, and you don't feel great about either side unless you kind of look at things through this gambling lens where these are spots. There's spots where proud programs with talent, great fan bases are going to show up and show out, and they both did. So credit to Auburn for figuring out how to do it, even by virtue of some wonky rules, but it certainly sets up a I don't want to overstate what it is. It's Texas against Texas A&M for a berth in Atlanta and a date with Georgia. Do I have anyone else from the SEC that I'm supposed to talk about? I think we're all set on the SEC sort of by the day. It's a brutal day for your league when A&M, Bama, and Ole Miss all lose on the road, and trying to figure out a lot of different things. Trying to figure out conference championship games, texting a little bit with Stanford Steve. In the Power Four, we still don't know who plays. We know SMU plays, but we don't know who. We know Oregon plays, but we don't know who. We know Georgia now plays, but we don't know who. So I mean, there's still a ton to get sorted next week as it relates to who plays whom, who. It's not that late for me to not know grammar. Let's just say the matchups. See how I did that? Kids, if you can't figure out a word, just do a whole new sentence. That's a one to grow on from your buddy Scott Van Pelt. And in the Big 12, it could be any one of 4 teams. Just chaos. I have not talked about a game featuring a playoff team, the one that lost to Northern Illinois. Here are the statistics for Notre Dame. 2 games against the Service Academy. Not 1, but 2 bald-headed bozos on this podcast said, one of them's going to get Notre Dame. Navy was unbeaten. Army was unbeaten. And both Stanford Steve and your boy said, one of them's going to get Notre Dame. Upon further review, none of them is going to get Notre Dame. The combined scores, the aggregate Notre Dame versus Service Academies, 100-28. 51-14 over Navy, 49-14 for Army, and Coach Monken's guys quite literally signed up for 60. I believe it was a 4th down score inside 30 seconds left for them to get to their second touchdown. I believe it was their quarterback, Bryson Daly, that took it in for the score. By the way, I always say about the Service Academy folks, these folks are the best of us. These are the men and women that sign up to defend our freedoms at home and abroad. And when I see Bryson Daly, and I look at that guy, I just think, someday, if somebody like that knocks on your door and I would like to take your daughter out, you go, well, Bryson, treat her right. And you tell your wife, good guy. He just, couldn't look more the part. Looks like someone that could lead a team into battle, could lead the infantry into battle. And that guy, that coach, that program, nothing but respect for what they do. This is just a game that's beyond their weight class. It isn't particularly complicated. Notre Dame's Notre Dame, and you just don't have nearly enough to play against Notre Dame. That's it. Neither does Navy. And I took Army plus 14.5. If you gave me the 14.5 and then gave me another 14.5, we would have needed another touchdown and an onside kick and another score. In review, not enough points. However, winners, 6-3. No big deal. But Notre Dame over Army, you feel like a dunce when you watch it and you just go, oh, there's no chance. No chance. And there wasn't. So again, the aggregate of Notre Dame against Army and Navy, 100-28. And so now, if you are anti-Notre Dame and you don't want to see them go to the playoff, what you have to do is root for USC, a team I am currently watching play against UCLA in the all-time greatest uniform game in the sport. Although watching it at past midnight on the East Coast, I think on an app. I don't know. Maybe this is on NBC Regular. Shout out to Kenny Mayne. But it's just odd. It's past midnight on the East Coast, and we're watching USC and UCLA. You're supposed to be watching this in the daytime on ABC with Keith Jackson. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to that was a bad Keith Jackson. I haven't done it in a long time. But what a great uniform game. UCLA's just taking the lead. If you're anti-Irish, you need to root for SC next week to knock them off. But even so, with all the carnage, what I'm trying to figure out right now if I could see the college football playoff rankings and where we entered into this day, I mean, who benefits? Tennessee's going to benefit. SMU's going to move up. But then beyond that, who beyond that? A&M lost, BYU lost, Colorado lost. Like Clemson benefits. And you guys are all mad at the SEC teams that don't play anybody. They played the Citadel. Now they have a game with South Carolina, who's right behind them, and they play that game in Death Valley. And so given all of the stumbles in front of them, BYU, A&M, Colorado, Alabama, Ole Miss, all losing, Clemson and Tennessee are the teams that clearly seem to be ascending and are in play, unless people are going to try to talk themselves into some 3-loss team. But like Bama only gets to play Auburn. And look, we saw Auburn battle tonight, but they're 5-6. They're playing to be bowl eligible. Ole Miss plays Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. There's no bounce that either one of them can get off a win. So it seems like Tennessee's got a chance. Vanderbilt has a chance to do, as they always say, the funniest thing ever, right? Again, this is a chance for me to remind you about our friends at Fidel who played Rocky Top when Vanderbilt beat them however many years ago. But the Vols have to go to Nashville to play the Commodores. Vol Nation. Y'all know what to do now. Don't go into Nashville and get beat, because then you're going to drive by the Fight-Out house, and the guy with the broken leg's going to be doing calisthenics to Rocky Top. That's a giant game. Clemson, South Carolina next week becomes a giant game. And the Texas A&M game decides who goes to the SEC championship game. So, I don't know, man. I go all the way back to the Indiana, and I just ask yourself this. Do they have a win that impresses you? No. Like the Penn State schedule at Wisconsin, at USC, at Minnesota. Like they went to Morgantown. Morgantown didn't cooperate. West Virginia didn't have a good year this year. But even though those aren't wow wins, they got the Illinois ranked win, and it only stays ranked because of what happened at the end today with the chaos I described earlier. But Penn State, they've got like if it was basketball, they'd be like quad 2 wins, right? Something like that. Does that sound about right? Indiana, they just don't have the eye-popping wins that you want. And they went into Ohio State, and they had 150 yards of offense. And this was a chance to shut everybody up that thought that they weren't good enough, and they couldn't move the football. I still think they're a playoff team. I think they're going to go to the playoff. And they're going to go to the playoff. In the end, the committee won't have to make a hard decision with any of these SEC teams. It does not appear. Right? There may be, I don't know, would there be a decision to make as it related to a Miami? If they lost, no, because they don't have a win. Like Miami's got their win is at Florida, I guess. They don't have a win. Louisville at Louisville. I don't know what happens to the Louisville win after they lost to Stanford last week. I don't know how we grade it. We do that transitive thing. I don't know if you're one that points to Indiana's record and feels like the fact that they haven't beaten a heavyweight is disqualifying. I understand that side of it to a degree. I also think that they've largely demonstrated that they kicked the crap out of everybody else. And going to Columbus and getting beat badly isn't a crime. But, the one chance you got with the high-end opponent, you only have 150 yards, first drive, last drive. That's tough. But it's probably not going to matter because I don't think the committee is going to end up having to make a hard decision necessarily because there's too many. Unless it becomes and there's no way that I can envision like a 3-loss SEC team getting in over a 1-loss Indiana team, nor should they. I could do the same thing anybody would point out, like if Bama played Indiana, would Bama be favored? They would. They also were double-digit favorites at Vanderbilt and at Oklahoma tonight, and they lost both those games. So we can't do that as a reason for inclusion. Ole Miss was an 11-point favorite in Florida. They were double-digit favorite home against Kentucky, and they lost these games. So it can't be that. It can't be that. It's going to drive some people crazy. It isn't Indiana's fault that the schedule they got this year with the new people from the Pac-12 didn't give them a chance to play in Oregon. USC, like I think anyone that watched Penn State play USC earlier this year knows, like that was a good USC team on that day. It took a lot to beat them, and they did. So at the end of it, I think Indiana's going to end up being a playoff team. All they got to do is beat Purdue, and Purdue is not good. So in review, he said, sucks without the big fella because I'm really curious what he sees on Indiana. Really, really curious. Is seeing them basically unable to do anything in between the first and the last drives, like does that make him think, well, I don't think they could compete at the highest end of this? But I think that there are too many people that disqualify themselves by losing games, that IU's going to get in. It would certainly appear. Like we get a bit of clarity. I'll be really interested to see where things are on Tuesday night. Programming note. We go to Los Angeles for the Harbaugh Bowl for Monday Night Football. And then it is Thanksgiving week. There will be no midweek pod. We'll be back by Saturday night, a week from Saturday. I believe Stanford Steve is with us from a hotel in College Station. I think that's the plan and the play. We need that because then we're going to have who's playing where, conference championship games. We will have then had our playoff rankings to get an idea of just how in play is. If Clemson wins, is that put them in? Might. Just how much cushions is a 2-loss Tennessee going to have? And is Vandy really will have an opportunity to play spoiler in that one? The Big 12, we will not know anything until next week when we got to figure out who the hell wins their games that get them into the conference championship. I believe Baylor is even still in play if everything goes right, which is amazing given that Aranda's seat looked like it was getting hot, but they've sorted some things out. But they got to play Kansas next week, openly rooting for Kansas. No disrespect to Baylor, just openly rooting for Kansas and Coach Leipold to get to a bowl game because they're as hot as anybody. 3 straight ranked wins on the back end of what was a disappointing year to start. But other than that, it's just a day of mayhem. Really, really rough day for the SEC. No conference is chestier. They deserve the right for it. I'm of the mindset that the places that you saw tonight, those venues, if you think they're the same as others, I don't. But that's still you got to win the games. And if you lose 3, and now A&M has, now Bama has, now Mississippi has, well, then you give plenty of reasons why you can be excluded. And if I'm in the SEC, I just say, fine, I'm never playing anyone ever again. No more. I'll play my conference teams, and then everything else is just every easy game I can get, because why bother? But it was a fun day. 6-3, no big deal. I'm literally in a position now where I've got flag football early. We had actually snowed here, which was wild, but then it rained Friday. So flag gets pushed to Sunday. Huh? Who's getting up early for Texans? Your boy. Then Sports Center, then we travel west. But it's Thanksgiving week. A great week. We appreciate all of you guys out there for hanging out with us. Appreciate all of our crew that's been part of trying to do this. It's this space, this sport. There's nothing quite like it. I think days like this are great reminders of just how passionate people are all over the country for it. So we're thankful for that, but mostly, obviously, what we're thankful for, a chance to be with family. Or I'll try to remind those Gator fans, I told you. Huh? Told you. A chance to be together, think about the things, think about your blessings, count them up. And we'll be back by Saturday with even more clarity of what we've got in a day like this one. I can't think next week will be as bad. It'll probably be worse. And then the committee will really have some things to figure out. But we'll see you a week from Saturday night, late night / Sunday morning in this space. We'll see you for Sports Center in the middle, both on Sunday night and on Monday Night Football. It's the Ravens and the Chargers. Be well.